In this video, I will be demonstrating how to compose functions using tables and graphs. Please go ahead and begin checking your answers to the first page of the notes packet. Number 1, did you find that f of 0 is equal to -5? Or that f of x equals -3 with an x value of 2? Number 2, did you find that g of 2 is equal to 1? Or that g of x equals 0, so the input must be 1? Number 3, did you find that f of 4 is equal to -1? Or that g of -1 is equal to -3? Question number 4 says, notice how the value of the output for number 3a is the same as the value for the input in 3b. Notice how the output for 3a is the input for 3b. The process of using the output from one function as an input in another function is called function composition, and can be noted either as f of g of x or f open circle g. This is not a multiplication symbol. It's a composition symbol. In problem number 3, we would write the function composition as g of f of 4. Did you explain how you would evaluate g of f of 4? If not, let's go ahead and go through it. The first thing you should do is start by finding f of 4, which equaled -1. You then use that output of -1 as the input in g of x, so you're going to find g of -1. You'll find the answer of g of -1, which is equal to -3, and so the final answer you get is your final answer. That means g of f of 4 is equal to -3. When doing composition, you're going to start on the inside and work your way out. So I started by finding f of 4. Once I had that output, I then substituted that into g of x for my new input. Let's go ahead and see how this looks on the next page. Okay, so this time it says that we're going to find f of g of 4. So we're going to start on the inside. So I'm going to start with g of 4. So I'm going to go to the g of x table, which is right here. I'm going to look for 4 as an input, which is right here, and I'm going to follow it across to determine what the output is. So g of 4 is equal to 5. Now, I'm going to use that 5 as an input in the function we haven't used yet, which is f. So now I'm going to go to the f table. I'm going to look for 5 as an input value, and I'm going to follow it across. It equals 0. So that means f of g of 4 is equal to 0. Notice how I'm writing my final answer in function notation, because we are doing function work. Now the next one is using the open circle. It is not my particular favorite, but you start with the second function when it's in this notation. So I'm going to start with f of 4. So I'm going to go to the f of x table this time, and 4 is equal to -1. So f of 4 is equal to -1. I'm then going to use that -1 as my input in g of x. So I'm going to find g of -1. Let's go to the g table, locate -1, here it is, and follow it across. Now, let's go ahead and write our final answer using function notation. So this time, it says g of f of 4, but we could also write it as g of f of 4. I really like writing it in this notation because I can clearly see what the input is because it's on the inside of the parentheses. Sometimes when I'm working with the open circle, I'll just go ahead and cover it over with a set of parentheses. That way I can clearly see what the input is and where I need to start. Let's continue on to the next page. Okay, so now we're looking at graphs. The first example on this graph page says find f of g of 4. So let's go ahead and pay attention to the graphs. The first one is called f of x. The second one is called g of x. So since we're starting with our input of g of 4, make sure you go to the red graph. So I'm going to go to 4 on the x-axis. Here it is. And I'm going to follow it up to find the output, which is equal to positive 1. This is not a negative sign. That is the grid line of the graph. Now, we're done working with the g of x function graph, so we're going to go ahead and work on the f of x graph. So now I'm going to find f of 1 using that output we just found. So here's 1 on the f graph, follow it to the actual function, and that equals 3. So my final answer of f of g of 4 is that answer we just found, which is 3. On the next graph, g of f of 5, I'm rewriting it because that's the way I like to look at it. G of f of 5. So I'm going to start by finding f of 5 because that's on the inside. So I'm going to go to the f graph. I'm going to look for 5 as my input, and I'm going to follow it up. That has an output value of 1. So now I'm going to use that output value of 1 in g of x. So g of 1 is equal to, here it is, 0. So my final answer of g of f of 5 is equal to 0. Now on the next graph, we have both f of x and g of x shown at the same time on the same coordinate plane. G of 0 is where we need to start because that's on the inside. So g of 0. Here's 0, follow it to the graph. That equals negative 5. So now I'm going to find f of negative 5. So here's negative 5. Let's follow it up. That has an output value of 7. So our final answer of f of g of 0 is equal to 7. On the next one, we want to start with f of 0. That's where we start. So I'm going to go back to the origin, and I'm going to follow it up to the graph. That has an output value of 8. We're going to use that output value as our new input, so we're going to find g of 8. G of 8, well, here's 8. Follow that down. That equals negative 3. So our final function composition is g of f of 0, which equals negative 3. Or g, open circle, f of 0 equals negative 3. Okay, you are now going to go ahead and practice this skill in the practice packet.